So here's a stat that I can't decide if it surprises me or not. About two-thirds of HBS graduates leave their first post-MBA job within 18 months. And when you consider that somewhere between a third and a half of the class goes into consulting, that means a huge chunk of those early departures are consultants who went in and are already leaving. So, why do so many people recruit for consulting if most of them don't actually want to be consultants long term? In today's video, I'm going to give you an honest breakdown of why consulting is the default path at HBS, the real reasons people choose it, what happens after they leave, and what HBS students actually think about the future of consulting in the age of AI. So let's start with the actual data. About half of the HBS class has previous consulting experience somewhere in their career, even if it wasn't their most recent job before HBS. And about a third of the class comes directly from consulting as their pre-MBA role. And most of those people do go back because they're sponsored. Of the students who did not come from consulting, roughly 30% of them recruit for consulting internships. And of those who intern, about 80% accept the return offer and go back to consulting full-time after graduation. So, consulting is both the biggest feeder into HBS and the biggest employer coming out. And that's not an accident. It's the result of a very well-oiled recruiting machine, which I talked about in the first video of my series, talking about structured versus unstructured recruiting. But these numbers don't tell you why people go into consulting. So let's break down the real reasons. From what I've observed, there are four major reasons HBS students choose consulting. The first reason is money, which, let's be real, is everybody to some degree. Base pay coming out of HBS for MBB firms is about $192,000 with roughly a $30,000 signing bonus and a 25% annual performance bonus. That's meaningful, but it's also not the absolute highest. Investment banking and PE can pay more. But consulting is a guaranteed high-income job from a reputable employer with a clear promotion timeline and great exit opportunities. At the end of the day, you're looking at a promotion in about every 2 years if you stay. And when you're sitting on $250,000 of business school debt, a guaranteed 200K plus starting salary with a clear trajectory is hard to walk away from. The second reason is sponsorship. This one is huge and sometimes taboo to talk about. For international students, consulting is often the most reliable path to employer-sponsored work authorization in the United States. The major firms sponsor a large volume of international hires, so it's both the easiest and most common route. And when your ability to stay in the country depends on finding a sponsor, the structured, high-volume recruiting process of consulting becomes incredibly attractive, regardless of whether you're passionate about the work or not. The third reason is the one I find most interesting and a trap I also fell into, and it is procrastinating the soul searching. A meaningful percentage of people go into consulting because they don't know what they want to do, and consulting buys them time. The recruiting process is extremely well documented. There are tons of resources to help you succeed. The timeline is structured, and the offer comes early, usually in January or February. And once you have it, the anxiety of recruiting is over. So compare that to unstructured recruiting, where you're sourcing your own opportunities, managing your own timeline, and potentially still interviewing in April or May with no guarantee. For someone who's already stressed out about academics and social dynamics, the structured safety net of consulting is incredibly appealing, even if the actual job isn't what excites them the most. These are the people who tell themselves they'll use consulting to explore industries and figure out what they want. And to be fair, some of them do that, but many of them end up with golden handcuffs. The salary is too high to walk away from, the lifestyle becomes normalized, and soul searching gets postponed again. And the last reason is genuine passion. I'll be honest, I'm not sure many people are genuinely passionate about consulting as a long-term career, Even the consultants in my class who came from MBB and are going back often complain about not wanting to return because, golden handcuffs. The only people I've met who seem genuinely passionate about consulting are the partners I interviewed with, but that's probably why they're partners. They love their sector, they're deeply knowledgeable, or at least seem to be because they've interviewed enough experts. They've built expertise over decades, but even they are visibly tired, and there are major trade offs, mostly around family. Your coworkers become your community because you spend more time with them than with anyone else. And that's a lifestyle choice that works for some people, but it's a trade off everyone should understand before signing. So now let's talk about the churn, because most people who go into consulting leave within 1 to 2 years. This is common knowledge. People go in knowing that they will leave. It's almost treated like a 2 year extension of business school because the structured learning, exposure to different industries, and the prestigious name on the resume are something they want before they move on to what they actually want to do. So, where do consultants go after they leave consulting? Usually a director or VP role in corporations or in startups. Some people start their own thing. McKinsey in particular has the most startups launched by former employees of any consulting firm or really any company. So that's crazy. And some of them go into investing like PE or PE ops or VC. So consulting for many people is a well-compensated pit stop, not a destination, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that, as long as you go in with your eyes wide open about what you're choosing and what you're deferring. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room, AI. How AI will impact consulting is a conversation happening constantly at HBS. It's in our desale class, our strategy class, our TEM class, in the hallways, over lunch. What does AI mean for consulting? So the consensus amongst us students is that AI will probably replace the analyst level, and each person at the firm is expected to produce more and higher quality decks. The research, the slide decks, the rinse and repeat analysis that firms have always sold, because it's pretty common knowledge that consulting firms will just take a framework they built for one client and then sell a version of it to another client. AI makes all of that easier and faster. The parts of the job that involve gathering data, synthesizing information, and building presentations are exactly the tasks that large language models are already good at. And we're seeing the effects. Firms are pulling back on hiring, particularly international students, because that 100K investment to sponsor someone looks a lot more uncertain when AI can handle a meaningful portion of the work that person could do. We talk about the K-shaped economy. The people at the top who can leverage AI will become more productive and more valuable, and the people at the entry level whose work AI can replicate become more expendable. But is MBB insulated? Maybe a little bit. The brand is strong compared to non-MBB firms, but the underlying business model, billing clients hundreds of thousands of dollars a week for teams of smart people doing analysis, is directly threatened by tools that can do that analysis faster and cheaper. But will all consultants disappear entirely? No, probably not. The relationship management, the client trust, the ability to navigate organizational politics and drive change, those are deeply human skills that AI can't replicate. But we expect clients to become better equipped, demand deeper insights, and the ratio of senior relationship managers to junior analysts is going to shift dramatically. So, if you're considering consulting, this is what I want to tell you. If you're going into consulting because you genuinely want to learn how to structure business problems, work across industries, and build a foundation for a future career, that is a legitimate reason. The skills are real, the training is valuable, the case prep interview alone taught me how to structure my thinking and improve my confidence in every other interview I did. And if you're going into consulting because you need sponsorship, I get it. That's a practical reality, and there's no judgment in making a pragmatic career choice to stay in a country you want to build your life in. But if you're going into consulting because you don't know what else to do, I want to challenge you on that. You might not have the time or energy to reflect when you're grinding 60-plus-hour weeks at a consulting firm. The soul searching you're deferring now doesn't get easier when you're exhausted and making really great money. It gets harder, and the golden handcuffs get tighter every month. So it might be better to confront yourself now and do the hard introspection now, while you're maybe still in school, still have a stable job, while you still have the space and the support, rather than signing up for 2 years of structured avoidance and hoping the answer reveals itself. So, is consulting overrepresented at HBS? Definitely yes. Other schools have very different cultures around this. At GSB, almost nobody wants to be a consultant. HBS has a unique dynamic where the structured recruiting machine, the concentration of former consultants, and the firm's heavy investments in campus presence creates a gravitational pull that is very hard to resist. But just because the gravity is strong doesn't mean you have to follow it. There are incredible jobs in tech, investing, LDPs, startups, and industries most HBS students have never considered. So I promise you, there is something out there for you that you are passionate about that will make you excited to wake up every single day for. So at the end of the day, the question isn't, should I go into consulting? The question is, what do I actually want? And is consulting the best way to get me there? Or is it just the path of least resistance right now? So that's my honest breakdown of why so many HBS students end up in consulting, what happens afterwards, and what the future might look like for consultants in the age of AI. In the next video, I want to dive deeper into the international student recruiting journey. We already touched upon it briefly in this video, but next week we'll talk about it more in depth, especially if you're an international student who does not want to do consulting but does want to stay in the US. So subscribe so you don't miss it. As always, feel free to put your questions in the comments, and until next time, bye guys!